The House of Cannibals is a story of survival against unimaginable hardships, a battle not just against monstrous beings, but against the very essence of fear and despair. Inspired by true accounts of cannibalistic tribes, this narrative weaves history and fiction into a suspenseful and terrifying journey that will keep readers on the edge of their seats. Will Jack, Anna, Tom, and Linda find a way to escape the clutches of the cannibals? Or will they succumb to the darkness that lurks within the forest? Their fate hangs in the balance as they fight for their lives in this unforgiving. The story begins with four friends, Jack, Anna, Tom, and Linda, who decide to spend their vacation exploring untouched wilderness. They hear about a haunted house deep in the forest and decide to investigate. They start their journey early one morning, fully equipped with necessary gear and a lot of courage. They trek through dense forests, cross small streams, and climb high hills. After hours of hiking, they find the house. It stands hidden in the forest's shadows, with old walls and broken windows. A chilling sensation runs down their spines. They enter the house and begin to explore. In the dim light of their flashlights, they see old furniture, faded paintings, and signs of a life long gone. But as they delve deeper into the house, they start sensing something is wrong. They hear strange noises from upstairs and feel an inexplicable presence. Suddenly, they hear a loud noise from behind them. They turn around to see a secret wall opening, revealing a dark corridor. They decide to follow it, unaware that they are stepping into the territory of cannibals. Their terrifying journey has only just begun. This village wasn't always the terrifying place it is now. It used to be a small, peaceful, and friendly community. The villagers lived by farming and raising livestock, working together in harmony. However, everything changed completely after a horrific accident. One day, a nearby nuclear reactor malfunctioned, releasing a massive amount of radiation. This village, located not far from the reactor, was severely contaminated. The villagers began to change. They started losing their sanity, their bodies became deformed, and they grew aggressive and violent. They began attacking and eating others. The once peaceful village turned into a horrifying place inhabited by cannibals. The haunted house that our group of friends found is the gathering place for these cannibals. It was once the house of the village mayor, but it has now become the hideout for these monstrous beings. These cannibals have existed for decades, and they continue to hunt any unfortunate prey that wanders into their territory. Now Jack, Anna, Tom, and Linda have unwittingly stepped into this perilous land. When the villagers began to be affected by the radiation, they underwent a series of horrifying transformations. At first they felt fatigued, dizzy, and nauseous, but soon these symptoms became much more severe. They started losing their cognitive abilities, perceiving everything around them in a hazy and unclear manner. They became aggressive and violent, attacking those around them without any clear reason. Their bodies also began to deform. Their skin turned pale and sickly. Their eyes glowed red, and their teeth became razor sharp. They grew stronger, faster, and more resilient. Ultimately, they began to consume human flesh. They hunted others, dragging them into the shadows and devouring them. The survivors in the village tried to fight back, but they couldn't match the strength and ferocity of the cannibals. Now, this once peaceful village has become the refuge of horrifying creatures, the cannibals. As they stepped into the village, Jack, Anna, Tom, and Linda sensed a chilling and ominous atmosphere. The abandoned houses, withered vegetation, and the absence of any sound except for the wind whispering through the cracks of old doors heightened their unease. They decided to find a place to take shelter for the first night. They discovered a small, sturdy house that had been abandoned for a long time. After tidying up a bit, they set up a safe area, preparing for a long and tense night. That night, they were awakened by strange noises. They heard distant roars, footsteps on dry grass, and heavy breathing. They realized they were no longer alone in this village. The next morning, they decided to continue exploring the village. They found signs of chaos and violence, such as dried bloodstains and evidence of struggles. They also discovered signs of the cannibals, such as fragments of bones and torn pieces of clothing. Trying to stay calm, they continued searching for clues about the cannibals. They knew they needed to learn more about their enemy if they hoped to survive another night. There are many reasons why the survivors in the village couldn't resist the cannibals. Firstly, the radiation-induced transformation made the cannibals stronger and more resilient. They could withstand powerful blows and keep attacking, while ordinary people could only fight back for a short time before being severely injured. Secondly, the transformation also made them faster and more agile. They could move stealthily in the dark, launching surprise attacks and disappearing before anyone could react. Lastly, fear rendered the survivors almost helpless. They were terrified by the horrifying changes in their neighbors and friends, and this fear robbed them of their ability to fight back. Because of these reasons, the survivors in the village couldn't resist the cannibals. They were forced to flee, hide, and try to survive each day. They might be lurking around the abandoned house where the group is sheltering, or they could be hunting other prey nearby. The distant roars could be their way of communicating with each other or expressing anger and aggression. The sound of footsteps on dry grass might indicate their movement, while the heavy breathing could suggest they are stalking or chasing a prey. However, these are just theories and can't be confirmed. The group needs to be cautious and stay on high alert to handle any potential situation. In the darkness of the night, Jack, Anna, Tom, and Linda decided to split up to explore the surrounding area. Tom, with his courage and curiosity, chose a path of his own, promising to meet the group at the rendezvous point in an hour. Tom ventured deeper into the forest, his footsteps crunching on the fallen dry leaves, the murmurs echoing in the stillness of the night. The pale moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting eerie shadows on the ground. He felt the cold and ominous atmosphere of the deep woods, but was determined to uncover the source of the strange noises the group had heard. Suddenly, Tom sensed movement behind him. He turned and saw a group of grotesque figures approaching. They had mutated forms, with bulging muscles, rough skin, glowing eyes, and wide mouths filled with razor-sharp teeth. Their hands and feet were large and powerful, with sharp claws. They were unlike any creatures Tom had ever seen. Before he could react, one of them swiftly lunged forward and grabbed his wrist. Fear overwhelmed Tom as he realized he had fallen into the hands of the cannibals. He struggled to break free, but their strength was too great. Tom knew he couldn't escape on his own and hoped his friends would notice his absence and find a way to rescue him. The grotesque figures dragged Tom into a dilapidated house deep within the forest. They locked him in a dark room with windows tightly shut, allowing no sunlight to penetrate. Tom struggled, but their strength was overwhelming. He was tied tightly to an old wooden post, unable to move. Tom spent the first few days in hunger and fear. They gave him nothing to eat or drink, letting him grow weaker by the day. Their mocking laughter and malicious gazes only heightened his terror. Tom knew they were preparing to make a meal out of him. Despite this, Tom didn't lose hope. He thought of Jack, Anna, and Linda and believed they wouldn't abandon him. He tried to keep his spirits up, searching for a way to escape his grim captivity. He planned and waited for the right moment to break free and reunite with his friends. Unfortunately, all of Tom's efforts were in vain. The first days passed in hunger and fear. He tried to resist, but the strength of the grotesque figures was too great. They gave him no food or drink, letting him grow weaker each day. One day, the grotesque figures took Tom out of the dark room. They dragged him to a place he had never seen before. There was a large fire pit with red flames roaring up from the ground. Tom looked around and found himself in what appeared to be a large kitchen. He saw sharp knives, large pans, and white porcelain dishes. He realized that the grotesque figures were preparing to cook him. Tom tried to fight back, but his strength had waned from days of hunger. He felt his consciousness slipping away, and finally, everything blurred before his eyes. A group of bizarre individuals dragged Tom into a dilapidated house deep in the forest. They locked him in a dark room, the windows tightly shut, devoid of any sunlight. Tom tried to resist, but their strength was overwhelming. He was tied tightly to an old wooden post, unable to move. Tom spent the first few days in hunger and fear. They did not feed him, only letting him starve and weaken day by day. Their mocking laughter and their eyes full of malice made him even more terrified. Tom knew that they were preparing to eat him. However, Tom did not give up hope. He thought of his friends, Jack, Anna, Tom, and Linda, and believed that they would not abandon him. He tried to keep his spirits up, looking for ways to escape from this brutal captivity. He made plans, waiting for an opportunity to escape from here to return to his group. Unfortunately, all of Tom's efforts were unsuccessful. The first few days passed in hunger and fear. He tried to resist, but the strength of the bizarre group was too great. They did not feed him anything, just let him starve and weaken day by day. Then one day, the bizarre group took Tom out of the dark room. They dragged him to a place he had never seen before. There was a large fire pit with flames blazing up from the ground. Tom looked around and found himself in a large kind of kitchen. He saw sharp knives, large pans, and white porcelain dishes. He realized that he was being prepared as a meal by the bizarre group. Tom tried to fight back, but his strength had weakened from the days of starvation. He felt himself slowly losing consciousness, and finally, everything became blurry in front of him. Tom no longer had the strength to resist. He was dragged by the bizarre group to the middle of the large kitchen, where there was a large butcher's table made from hard wood. They began preparing for their horrific feast. They butchered Tom mercilessly, without any pity. Fresh dishes were made from Tom's flesh, each dish meticulously prepared. The bizarre group sat around the dining table enjoying the dishes made from Tom's flesh. They laughed, shouted, even complimented the taste of Tom's flesh. Their enjoyment turned Tom's pain into their pleasure, a sight too horrifying and cruel. Sadly, Tom had met his untimely end. The cruel group, after feasting on him, started making plans for their next victims. Their laughter and triumphant cheers echoed in the large kitchen, a chilling reminder of their ruthless intentions. They began to speak of Tom's friends, Jack, Anna, and Linda. The names were mentioned with a cruel glint in their eyes, a clear indication of their next targets. The group was not content with just Tom. They were preparing to hunt down the rest of his friends. The forest, once a place of beauty and tranquility, had turned into a hunting ground for these monstrous beings. Their insatiable hunger for human flesh was driving them to commit more horrifying acts. The fate of Tom's friends hung in the balance as the group set out on their next hunt. In a horrific turn of events, the cruel group managed to deceive Jack, Anna, and Linda. They concealed their monstrous transformations, putting on a facade of normalcy to lure the unsuspecting trio into the house. The group presented them with an array of delicious dishes, which the tired and hungry friends gratefully accepted. After a long and exhausting search for their lost friend Tom, they were relieved to find a place to rest and eat. They indulged in the food, unknowingly consuming the very flesh of their dear friend Tom. The cruel group watched in perverse satisfaction as their plan unfolded. The realization of what they had consumed would surely be a shock to Jack, Anna, and Linda. But for now, they were unaware of the horrifying reality, enjoying the food and the brief respite from their search. The cruel group's plan had worked perfectly, setting the stage for their next horrific act. Jack was the one who noticed something was off with the food. He brought a piece of food to his nose and detected a strange scent he had never smelled before. But before Jack could warn his two friends, a sense of fatigue began to overtake him. The sedative had entered his bloodstream too quickly, making it impossible for him to stay alert. Jack tried to open his mouth to say something, but his lips felt frozen and he collapsed to the floor. All three of them, Jack, Anna, and Linda, fell into a state of unconsciousness. The room returned to silence, with only the sound of the wind blowing through the slightly open window. When Jack opened his eyes, he found himself tied to a chair in a dark room, with only the faint light from a single lamp hanging from the ceiling. He tried to recall what had happened earlier, but his mind was still foggy. At that moment, he heard footsteps from behind and a deep, cold voice spoke. "Welcome to my game." Jack turned his head and saw a man dressed in black from head to toe, his face covered except for a pair of sharp eyes. The man approached Jack and looked him straight in the eyes. "Who are you, and what do you want?" Jack tried to stay calm, though his mind was racing with 1,000 questions and fears. The man chuckled softly and then said, "My name is not important. What matters is that you have interfered in something that does not concern you, but don't worry, I will give you a chance. If you can solve the puzzles I present, you will be free." Jack looked around and saw Anna and Linda also tied up like him, both looking tired and bewildered. He knew he had to stay calm and think quickly to save all three of them. The man brought out a small box and placed it on the table in front of Jack. "Let's begin. This is the first puzzle." Jack looked at the box and began to feel the tension of the situation. He knew their lives depended on his intelligence and the cooperation of all three. The man was the leader of the cannibals. He sneered, his eyes full of malice. He called his accomplices and ordered them to lock Jack, Anna, and Linda into a large cage deep within the house. This was where they had previously imprisoned and tortured their victims. Jack, Anna, and Linda were shoved roughly into the cage, the door slamming shut behind them. They looked around and saw dried bloodstains and signs of desperate resistance from previous prisoners. Fear and despair began to envelop them. Anna trembled, trying to hold back her tears. "We have to get out of here. We can't become their next victims," she said, her voice filled with worry, her tears. "We have to get out of here. We can't become their next victims," she said, her voice filled with worry. Jack tried to stay calm. "Yes, we have to find a way out. But first, we need to think this through. They won't let us escape easily." Linda sat down on the ground, her eyes scanning the cage for any clues that might help them escape. "Maybe we can find something in this cage," she suggested. The three of them began to search the cage, checking every corner. They found a few small pieces of metal and some hard wooden scraps. Jack gripped a piece of metal tightly, looking into Anna and Linda's eyes. "We can use these to pick the lock or cut through the ropes," he said, his voice full of hope. Time passed as the three of them tried to pick the lock with the piece of metal. Sweat poured down their foreheads as they used all their strength to break free. Finally, after many attempts, the lock clicked open with a soft sound. Jack, Anna, and Linda quickly opened the door and slipped out, carefully avoiding detection. They stepped out of the cage, moving through the dark and eerie house. They had to move quickly and quietly, avoiding being noticed by their enemies. But just as they thought they were safe, a loud noise came from behind. The leader of the cannibals had discovered their escape and was now pursuing them. The three of them ran as fast as they could, their hearts pounding. They had to find a way out of the terrifying forest before they were caught again. Could they overcome the danger and find a way back to safety? Their harrowing survival journey was far from over. Just as they thought they had escaped, the leader of the cannibals caught up with them, his followers close behind. Jack, Anna, and Linda were overpowered and captured once again. Desperation and fear washed over them as they were dragged back to the house. The captors threw them back into the cage, but this time they singled out Anna. Jack and Linda screamed and fought, but they were brutally restrained. Anna was taken to a separate room, her cries for help echoing in the dark, empty corridors. The leader and his men, their eyes filled with cruelty and sadistic glee, subjected her to horrific abuse. The night was long and filled with torment. Jack and Linda, still trapped in the cage, were helpless, consumed by rage and anguish at what was happening to their friend. Jack's fists were bloodied from pounding on the bars, and Linda's sobs echoed through the night. When Anna was finally returned to the cage, she was a shell of her former self. Bruised and broken, she collapsed into Jack and Linda's arms. They held her, offering what little comfort they could in the horrific circumstances. Jack's mind was racing. The torment and violation of his friend fueled a burning resolve within him. They needed to escape, but now it wasn't just about survival. It was about justice and vengeance. Jack knew they had to be smarter and more strategic if they were going to get out alive and take down their captors. The three of them huddled together, whispering their plans. They knew the house better now and had a clearer understanding of their captors' routines. They decided to wait for the perfect moment to strike back. Days passed, filled with planning and careful observation. They took note of the guards' schedules, the layout of the house, and the potential weapons they could use. The wounds inflicted on them, both physical and emotional, were a constant reminder of their need for escape. Finally, the moment came. They had managed to conceal a few pieces of metal and wood, which they sharpened into makeshift weapons. One night, when the guards were at their most relaxed, the three friends made their move. With silent determination, Jack, Anna, and Linda overpowered the guards near their cage. Using their makeshift weapons with ruthless efficiency, they moved through the house, taking down their captors one by one. The element of surprise and their sheer willpower gave them the advantage. They reached the leader's room, where the final confrontation awaited. Jack, filled with a fierce sense of justice, led the charge. The fight was brutal, but in the end, they overpowered the leader, ensuring he would never harm anyone again. As dawn broke, the three friends stumbled out of the house, battered but victorious. The forest, which had once seemed like a prison, now felt like a path to freedom. They vowed to seek help and return to ensure that no one else would fall victim to the horrors they had endured. Their journey was far from over, but they had survived and overcome the worst.